the rectangular piece of land to the north of the site and also the Scottish Power substation there. And finally, just to note, there is noted to be a flooding issue on Alma Street just at the front of the site. This could at times block the proposed access there in one of the driveways, so this would need to be further considered prior to any development on the site there. Okay, I'll pass it back to yourself, Convener.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that. It's now an opportunity for the agent, Inderpal Gill, to come forward. Would you like to take a seat up there, sir? You bring your mic a bit closer so everybody can hear. Now you'll have 10 minutes starting from now. Then there'll be an opportunity for members when you're finished to ask any questions of your good self. 10 minutes from now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. I'm here today to discuss the application for the construction of 4 dwelling houses at the former lock-up site on Alma Street, Falkirk. The recommendation before you is one of refusal. However, I would like to take this opportunity to present the case for approving the current design as it stands, as it meets many of the necessary criteria. The proposed development aligns with several key planning policies, and I'd like to highlight a few. The site is a brownfield site, and this development represents a sustainable and appropriate reuse of the land. This is in direct support of both national and local objectives, which encourage regeneration of previously developed land. The site's location is within an existing urban area, ensures excellent access to public transport, cycling and walking routes. The current design encourages sustainable travel aligned with both local and national transport goals. The development will create quality housing within a well-connected urban setting. The existing design ensures that new homes will benefit from nearby amenities and support the creation of a sustainable community. I'd like to address some of the key concerns. While some concerns have been raised, I believe that these can be addressed without major changes to the design. The report mentions ongoing disputes regarding access rights and the red line boundary. I can confirm that the red line boundary has been accurately drawn from title deed plan of the property, which showed no other property has rights of access over the site. Moreover, as these disputes are legal matters, they should not be considered material to this application. The report handling agrees with a stance on this matter. Parking provision. The report states that there are only 6 parking spaces provided. However, the last design includes 7 on-site parking spaces, including 1 accessible space. While this might seem insufficient, the site's urban location, coupled with excellent public transport links and amenities within walking distance, mitigates any perceived shortfall. It's important to note that the area's historical context includes properties with limited or no parking, and the development reflects the established pattern. Additionally, we have taken advice from Scottish Power regarding access to the substation, and they've verbally confirmed that they don't require any additional parking spaces. We would be open to this to be included as a condition of any approval. The area's architectural styles are varied. While many properties in Alma Street are traditional stone buildings, 61A, for instance, deviates significantly in style and positioning in relation to the established building line on the street. Properties across the road on Alma Terrace and 40 Russell Street to the east also differ in style and density. The urban fabric of the area does not suggest a clear established architectural language. As for concerns about overlookings from plot 3 and 4, it's worth noting that 61A's upper floor window serves a stairwell, which is not a habitable room, and the one on the ground floor is obscure glass. Overlooking could be easily mitigated with appropriate boundary treatment or by relocating the bedroom windows in plot 3 or 4 to the gable end of the property. We are agreeable to this being added as a condition of any approval. Provisions are in place for treating and managing any potential contamination in the site's previous uses. This ensures the development will be safe and sustainable for residential use. We are agreeable to a site investigation report to be included as part of any approval. Approving the current design will bring significant benefits. The housing supply, for example, the development will help meet local housing demand, providing much needed homes in a central location, help the local economy. Both the construction phase and the subsequent occupation of these new dwellings will support the local economy. The increased population will positively impact local businesses, particularly those on Graham's Road. The approval of this design will regenerate a site which is currently underutilised and has become somewhat of an eyesore, thereby enhancing the area's appearance and functionality. In closing, I urge the committee to approve the current design for the construction of 4 dwelling houses in Alma Street. The design aligns with key planning policies, addresses concerns in a manner that does not require significant alterations, and offers a substantial benefit to the local community. The development represents a positive and sustainable use of a brownfield site, contributing to the wider goals of urban regeneration and housing provision. I'd like to thank everybody for their time and consideration.
Thank you very much, sir. If you just stay where you are, and we'll open it up to members. You've heard the submission by Mr. Gill. Any questions at this stage to Mr. Gill from members either here or online? Councillor Redmond.
I think Councillor Sinclair had his hand up first if he wants to go.
So it's all right, Councillor Redmond, happy to give way if you want to ask your question.
No worries. It was just obviously you had mentioned plots 3 and 4 and how the existing house it's only got an obscured window and then a hall window. So plots 3 and 4 windows wouldn't look onto any bedrooms. But I was just thinking, if someone was stood at the clear window in the hall of the existing house, would they be able to look into the bedrooms of plot 3 and 4?
I think there is a potential for that. However, we need to do further drawings to confirm any overlooking. I think with the location, there's probably some degree of overlooking expected, just with how dense the fabric of the buildings in that area are. But that could be treated with an additional window included on the other elevation, or the sill height being raised to a point where a regular person standing at that window wouldn't be able to sort of see in.
Oh, thanks. The other one as well, when we were on site, parking was quite an issue. I suppose there's kind of two parts to that. Was, do you own the full site, or is there still a few of the former garages that are not owned? And how confident are you that you'll be able to generate enough parking spaces to satisfy the need for this site?
I think houses on the site would potentially appeal to people without cars, for starters, just due to the location of the amenities around the area. There's 2 on the location plan. You can see 2 lockups outside the site boundary, and the applicant is actively pursuing purchasing this part of the land. And obviously that would only be additional parking. There's no way to get any more houses on the plot by purchasing that land, but it would obviously help with parking provision on the site overall, essentially. So you'll see that just to the north of the site, kind of west of where we've shown a turning point. I must add that there was an additional revision to this drawing, which included an extra parking space. We were able to achieve 7 out of 8 or 9, I guess, depending on what the requirement would be.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Redmond. Councillor Sinclair.
Thanks, convener. I think Councillor Redmond did kind of touch on one of the questions I was going to ask about parking. I just wasn't quick enough to write down the number of spaces, but could the agent confirm, Mr. Gill, you're saying that you can deliver 7 parking spaces?
Yes, upon review of the last revision of this drawing, we were able to achieve 7 parking spaces. Okay. Okay. And just to confirm, we did have a verbal on-site meeting with Scottish Power regarding access to the substation. They only requested that there was nothing built beside the substation which would allow somebody to jump over the wall, and they would be happy to use a visitor space.
Okay. You spoke about an accessible parking space as well. That's included in the 7?
Yes, that's included in the 7. Okay,
thank you. Can I just inquire, are any of these properties that are looking to be built, if this was given the go ahead, are any of these to be affordable or social housing or anything like that?
that's not something we've discussed with the client or under consideration at the moment. However, if there was a requirement, I'm sure that the applicant would be open to a discussion around that.
Okay, thank you. Finally, the access to this site is quite tight and from a very tight street at the moment. There's a significant amount of parking issues and traffic flow issues within Alma Street and Alma Terrace at the moment. What mitigations are you looking to put in place for access to the site, not for building works, but also the mitigations in place for access if these properties are all built?
I think for building works, there would be some sort of plan for no works vehicles to be parked on that street, because, as you say, it's very much taken up by residents. With regards to access, you'll see that we've included a visibility display which aligns with the Roads Department's guidance on safe entry and exit to the site once built.
Okay, thanks, Convener. I'll come back to some questions for officers later in the debate. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for your report, Mr. Gill. I'm coming back to the parking side of it again. The recommendation was for 8 spaces plus 1 space to be available for Scottish Power. Now, irregularities with the power doesn't always happen at the right time, and should the power go in the middle of the night and all those spaces are taken up, you could still have a problem with power there, with the power companies there. There was a total of 10 spaces. You say that you've got 6, possibly 7, and still a shortfall of 3. And that would put it below the standards that we would normally ask. Is that what you call quality buildings? Because nowadays most quality houses that are for sale do have 2 spaces. So is that what you would call quality?
I appreciate what you've said. I guess we've had confirmation from Scottish Power that they don't require the extra space. So I would say that would be a shortfall of 2 spaces. And I think due to the location of all the local amenities, it would really appeal to people that don't own a vehicle. I appreciate you're saying most quality homes have 2 parking spaces, but I just think, obviously in the town centre, there's no requirement for any parking. However, I think there's a number of free car parks in that area, which are often underutilised in the evenings. But I think the real focus for the people that live in these houses will be 1-car households / 0-car households, which again, like I say, contributes to the local businesses, because they'll walk to all the businesses along Graham's Road to get all their provisions. And there's doctor surgeries, there's shops, there's supermarkets, there's a well-connected bus route along Graham's Road. I think this would really appeal to that type of homeowner who are looking to go carless.
Thank you. It certainly sounds like the good neighbourhood type, and the 20-minute neighbourhood is fulfilled in that. The ground as it is at the moment, there's constant car parking all along that, which would be the actual entrance, which is what Councillor Sinclair was alluding to. When you have the houses built, that obviously there will be a restriction on parking out there because they won't be able to access it. So how many do you think will actually be lost through that?
I think if we can go back to the site plan, I think there's obviously the main entrance, which is consistent with where the entrance is just now. So if we could pull up the site plan of the property, that would, I think, help me explain that a little bit better. although I must say, whenever I've gone to attend site, I've never had an issue parking fairly close to the site itself. But I appreciate there may be some loss due to the access. From what I remember, there was one property accessed off the main street, which would take away one space, but I would like to see that site plan to confirm. So it'd be the site plan rather than the location plan?
Jim, that'll be under the proposed block plan and levels.
Yeah.
It's just that the site is wide at the moment.
Yes.
And there are cars parking in front of it. You're going to put in one access point, and it won't be over the entire width of the plot, I wouldn't imagine.
So you'll see the access site to the north of Alma Street. That's more or less where the current access site is. There'd been nothing, no on-street parking lost to the north of that. However, there would most likely be 3 to 4 spaces lost in front of the driveways of plot 1 and plot 2.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. And one final one. How many bedroom houses are these?
I believe they're 3-bedroom houses.
Which would imply that they're family houses, which again brings back to the parking.
Yeah.
I've got a family along the road from us. There's a boy, a girl, a mum and a dad, and believe me, there's 4 cars in that house, and it's a nightmare for me to get parked. So this is something that, again, concerns me with the parking. Thank you very much for your help.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forrest. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning. Can I ask a question? If this was approved, when would you be looking to start building?
I think the applicant will be in a position to start building probably Q1 of next year.
Okay.
If we can get the relevant building warrant approved.
Okay.
He's very keen to get started.
I have a slight concern, and it's probably noted in the objections, but have you looked at the foliage in the area, and does it have Japanese knotweed? Because Japanese knotweed will take up to 4 or 5 years to fully treat, and if a house has got Japanese knotweed in it, you cannot get a mortgage on it.
No, I appreciate your concern. There's been no Japanese knotweed noted on the site currently. However, there would be a requirement for a full ground investigation report in the area, which would pick up any Japanese knotweed. With regards to the trees on the boundaries noted in the report, the proposals would allow for retention of these trees, mature trees anyway. But yeah, I appreciate the Japanese knotweed concern. I've raised that with the client, but I think we would need a professional to review the site, and we're more than happy for that to be included as a condition of approval.
So it's just my concern that if you're going to start building Q1 next year, and Japanese knotweed can take up to 5 years to actually to treat it, because other than that you could be covering in a problem for any people that buy the house.
I think the first stage would be to get that ground investigation report before proceeding any further with the development.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Any other questions? I'm looking online. No hands up. What about members here? Any other questions? To Mr. Gill, Provost.
Thanks very much, Convener. Morning, Mr. Gill. There's a small car park just across Alma Terrace, which is always underused. Have you considered looking at that and speaking to the residents across the road?
No, this isn't something we've explored to date, but yeah, it's certainly something we could explore. The site obviously currently has approval for a car park essentially, but the underutilised car park is certainly something the applicant could approach the owners for purchase or rent, I guess, to offset the shortfall.
Because it's very seldom used, that car park. There's car parking in Gowan Avenue as well, but I think you pay for that. But certainly their parking there as well. What about bin storage?
I think bin storage would be to the rear of the properties. They're not noted on the site plan, but they were considered. Bin collection, again, similarly would be towards on the site to the north. That's currently kind of not designated as anything. That's where we'd keep bin storage, which is allow direct access for the bin lorries to on pick-up collection day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that Councillor Flynn?
Yep, thank you,
Councillor Flynn.
Convener. Yep, just a quick question, Mr. Gill. You touched on it earlier about the 2 lockups that your client was perhaps looking to purchase. Now, without divulging any confidential information, are you able to give some indication how confident they may well be in succeeding with that purchase, because that would alleviate some of the parking issues?
I think it's a question of the value at the time, how much he pays for it, essentially. I think that's the level that the discussions are at. The lockups themselves aren't vehicular lockups. They're more garden storage type lockups, so there's no access as such required to them. But yeah, I think they're fairly advanced, the talks,
Okay.
but we didn't want to include them as part of the application because they're not yet purchased.
I can understand that. No, thanks for that. That helps. Thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Any other direct questions to the applicant's agent, Mr. Gill? None? None online? Okay, Mr. Gill, you can retake your seat. Thank you for that. This is an opportunity to go back to your officer now. Mr. McClure. Mr. McClure, you've heard the submission from Mr. Gill and the questions and answers from members. Anything to add to your initial report?
It's really just, again, to emphasise, I mean, obviously it's the current design is against many of our policies that within the local development plan to obviously ensure good quality development on a site for residential. These are obviously family homes, so they should have at minimum 2 spaces each. Alma Street is extremely heavily overparked. Even obviously when we were down in the visit, you would have seen the parking all along it. And it is quite difficult to park even during the daytime, let alone when everybody's home at night. So I wouldn't expect these to be carless homes at all. I would expect at least probably 2, at least a minimum 1 vehicle per home, but likely 2, which then would take, generally you would probably like to have somebody parked in the visitor spaces then just using them up as well. The actual layout though, the parking to and access is quite difficult, especially for plot 4. In terms of the reversing and coming out with your vehicle to on that site. And there does need to be access to the back plot as well. That's a small builder's yard. In terms of the 61 Alma Street existing house, which is quite heavily overlooked there, I don't see kind of movement of windows or anything like that alleviating that. It would actually probably be detrimental even further to the design of the houses. You'd also then probably impact plot 2 even more at plot 3. In terms of the plots themselves, they are extremely small. You would be able to get bin storage and things in them, but I mean, for example, if we had the block plan up as well, I mean, the garden grounds, just to give you an example, I couldn't lie twice out on it. They're so small from the back door, so obviously they are meant to be family homes. They're meant to be providing enough space for families to live, to work in and have a working garden ground as well on this site there. In terms of Japanese knotweed, obviously you would have to do a survey. What we've been notified by existing neighbours that this exists on the site. The site was actually cleared, which is illegal to do so without basically checking for the Japanese knotweed. So, because it can obviously spread it further, but we would need that. We don't have any information provided on the Japanese knotweed at this stage, so that would need to be provided prior to any actual development on site there as well. And At the moment, obviously, with the area to the north, which is the small rectangle they don't own, we obviously can't take that into account in terms of design, because they may or may not be able to purchase that in the future, and it would need to obviously come in and kind of look to redesign that. The car parking outside the site, obviously, as well, we have no control over that, so that we wouldn't be able to take that into account, and it'd be obviously up to residents if they would consider wanting to have a space that's remote from their own properties as well. So it's mainly for us, as I say, access design and the plot sizes as well. It's just it can't accommodate the infrastructure that's required for a family home on the site, and that's why I say we're looking at it at the moment as overdevelopment of the site, and it doesn't meet obviously the criteria of the relevant policies to do so, to actually create a good residential amenity for any families moving into those sites.
Before I open up, just ask a couple of questions myself, Stephen. The first one is that in terms of council, and you give us a good summary, but regarding the principle of development in this site, the council's not against this, is it?
No, I mean, it could be developed. It would be good to have residential on the site. It's just obviously managing a residential plot. If it's going to be a family home, you've got to obviously try and manage to get a good quality of a property for both existing homes that are there already, but also for them to moving into these properties. So yeah, the principal residential development on the site would be acceptable. I would generally say, given the requirements of a family home, if you want to do a family home, you'd probably be looking at maybe three if it was well designed on the site, that it could accommodate with, given the current limitations of the site and everything that's around it in terms of accesses, etc.
In terms of what the Mr. Gill had said, that maybe no appropriate to ask you, but the fact is that if this company had purchased these other two areas, would that be sufficient?
It might bring up the parking, obviously, but it still doesn't alleviate the issues with the plots themselves, with the actual houses, with the family homes that have been provided. The plots are still and there's overlooking issues. There's obviously just the garden ground size. It's the actual plots themselves are extremely tight for what's been offered for a family home in terms of the policy and guidance that covers such.
Thank you. And then my last question is in terms of, I think one of the major issues is the parking. See that we were down there during the site visits quite early in the day, and there was a lot of cars in those streets. So whose cars are they? They were parked here.
Yeah, it's mainly just all residents at the moment. Alma Street's obviously, the main part of Alma Street's designed obviously for prior to cars being in use, so it's designed for I'd say horses and carts really, but so there's basically no driveways really in most of the properties in Alma Street, so it causes a large overflow of parking along the street, and as you saw, obviously we were down during the day when a lot of people are actually away in their cars as well. It is quite a congested street.
So that brings a question. I mean, the train station's no far away, and people, you know, there's problems everywhere for parking, and people will go anywhere to park. And I would just say, trying to ascertain if this was people parking in that area that lived there but were there during the day, or was this people like that were parking ad hoc because they were going to the railway station, couldn't get in there and so forth. So that was the question. Okay, is Bailey Kerr, did you have your... Thank you.
I didn't, but I'll couple of questions to start with, Convener. It's been mentioned 2 or 3 times about this Japanese knotweed. Who actually says that the knotweed was there?
So it's basically representation submitted by neighbours saying they've had to treat that Japanese knotweed, and it was knotweed noted on the site. So we can only go by that. It would just be a matter of obviously a survey being done by a qualified person to state if there is any Japanese knotweed present on the site. We haven't had that submitted obviously during the application process. So as I say, we're not able to say if it is there or not. If it's found to be there, obviously it needs to be treated because it is an invasive species, and it can physically damage properties in terms it can push through concrete and brickwork, etc. So it does need to be treated. And as it was mentioned previously, you wouldn't get a mortgage if there was Japanese knotweed on the site.
Is there any of the neighbours experts in Japanese knotweed?
I couldn't tell you that.
No.
See,
for me, Steve, why I'm saying this is, if I'm going to object against something, I'm throwing everything at it, and that's just my view. But I would be content, if it did get passed, I would be content that a survey was done to see if there was that on site. My second question is, so it's been mentioned 2 or 3 times about parking, and the applicant saying they are happy they'll get 7 parking spaces, and we are saying 8 or 9.
It would be 9 required and 10 if Scottish Power also require a space.
So we're only taking the word the applicant's agent that Scottish Power says they don't require one.
Yeah, they've not confirmed to us that they don't require one.
Right, okay. Fine, that's fine at the moment. Thanks, Steve.
Going to go back. Councillor Sinclair, did you want to come back in?
Thanks, convener. Just a couple of brief questions. In relation to the parking and access requirements, and I'm not sure if this is for Stephen or if it's potentially for Craig Russell, if he's on the call. Where do those requirements come from?
Craig?
Yeah, morning, convener. Through you, yeah, the council has adopted a document called the National Roads Development Guide, and it's a document that details the standards that are required for parking, for roads design and access and that sort of thing. So that is a document that determines the number of parking spaces required for a residential development or a supermarket or any sort of development, and it's based on the number of bedrooms per property. So in this application here, we're looking at 4 3-bedroom properties. Each of those requires 2 parking spaces each, for a total of 8 parking spaces for the 4 houses. We also need a single visitor space for a total of 9 parking spaces, and then we have the question over whether the Scottish Power substation needs a space or not. Just to clarify, it wouldn't be the council that requires that space. There appears to be a question over whether Scottish Power require that space or not.
Thanks you, Craig.
Thanks, convener. Same with the access. I think I need a bit more clarity on the access and the visibility on the road itself at the moment. So what is being proposed and what is required?
Stephen? No, Stephen.
In terms of just the numbers that are currently on site?
Yeah, so the agent mentioned a visibility display. I suppose I'd like some clarity on what is being proposed here. We can see how narrow, from the block plan and the levels that are on the screen at the moment, we can see how narrow the access is from Alma Street. Almost directly across the road from another junction. So I suppose I'm just looking for a bit of clarity as to whether that's sufficient or whether there's something else that's required there.
Well, we'll maybe bring Craig Russell in this one as well. Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, convener. Again, through yourself. Again, the National Roads Development Guide determines the visibility display that's required from accesses onto roads. And in this case, the visibility display would be 2.4 metres by 43 metres. Now, those 2 measurements are taken from the centre line of the proposed access. So the 2.4 metres is measured from the very edge of Alma Street back into the site, and the 43 metres is measured from the centre line of the proposed access to the north and to the south. And then what you do is you connect those 3 dots, you basically draw a triangle, and that's your visibility display. So the visibility display is kept to the development side of the road, irrespective of what direction cars are travelling from. There's no visibility display shown on that site plan, so at the meeting today I can't tell you whether it's acceptable or not. I suspect it will be. There's not much in the way of obstruction there other than the rectangular area to the north of the access road.
Thanks, Craig. Councillor Sinclair?
Yeah, I think that's everything for me in terms of questions, but I probably would like to make a comment later on in the debate.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, questions at this stage? Any questions? Nobody online here? Okay then, we can enter full debate and see how members are feeling about this application. Provost Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. This site's been an eyesore in the landscape for many, many years. I visited it quite some time ago when there was wooden garages on it with trees growing through them. And we managed to get the garages removed, and there was the concrete garages as well that the kids were playing in. So it was dilapidated, and then I went there a few months ago and all the garages were away, so it was good to see that. Then this application came forward and I thought that's a positive development for the area. If you look at the top of Alma Street, there's probably 6 houses built on the corner of Gowan Avenue in Alma Street. It's quite tight. It looks like a smaller site than the actual development down there. There's no any gardens, so they're all monoblock, and there's a couple of driveways. So regarding policies, HCO2, windfall housing, I would say this is exactly what a windfall site means. HCO6, infill development and subplot division. This is clearly an infill site as it's surrounded on 3 sides by houses. IRO2, IRO3, IRO7 all meet the criteria of application. IR13, low and zero carbon development. As stated in the report, this application can meet policy IR13 through conditions. IR18, waste management and new development. We discussed the bin storage area, and this can be subject to conditions. With regards to design proposal, I believe the current site would benefit from the proposed housing, so meeting policy 14. Policy 15, local living in 20-minute neighbourhoods. It's placed in an urban area of Falkirk. I agree with the officer that it meets the criteria of policy 15. Policy 18, it's highly unlikely that most developments have all infrastructure readily available. So I don't think that really applies. So my feeling at the minute, subject to conditions, I would be minded to grant. That's my feeling at the minute. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Provost. I'm looking for other members to come into this debate now. Councillor Forrest.
Thanks, Convener. I understand where Provost Bissett's coming from, but just because the area has been an eyesore doesn't mean to say that we should accept the first proposal and possibly an overdevelopment of the site, because we've just heard from Craig, according to the National Roads Development Guide, the parking is supposed to be X, Y and Z. Clearly, that is not going to be reached in this case. This would mean that the site is being overdeveloped, or it would be. It would also mean that basically we'd be imposing lower standards in this area than anywhere else in Falkirk, or very few places else could. So at the moment, I'm minded to refuse.
Okay then, just to clarify where we are, we've got a motion by the Provost to grant the application subject to conditions and minded to grant, and we have an amendment by Councillor Forrest to refuse. I want to bring other members in at this stage.
Councillor Sinclair.
Councillor Sinclair, you want back in, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. The principle of development which you, Convener, kindly inquired about, I suppose is confirmed. That I don't think there's anybody here in this committee, or either online or in the room there, argues with the point that the site can be and should be developed in some way. But I think the question that we need to ask ourselves today is what's appropriate and what is right for that specific site. We've heard a lot about parking, we've heard a lot about access, we've heard a lot about visibility. we've also heard a significant amount, especially from the officers there, about the sustainability of this specific development for this specific piece of land. I think where my concerns lie is on the experience of living in that area right now, with the pressures that's already on the infrastructure in that area, and what adding to those pressures might look like. Now, I think I take the point that I think the Provost made about the properties at the far end of Alma Street at Gowan Avenue, where there's a suggestion that it's all monoblock, there's no gardens. There are gardens to the rear of the buildings, and these gardens appear to be substantial. According to the designs that we've seen on the screens today and as part of the packs that we all got that are publicly available, that there's very little by way of garden space. Now, for a property that, according to the plans and the elevations that are in the packs, for 3 double bedrooms, let's not kid ourselves, these are family homes for substantial professional people to buy and live in, who may have commuting commitments, who may live in this area a walking distance from the train station and from a public transport network. But as we know, I'm pretty sure we all know from our email inboxes that the public transport networks maybe aren't as good as they could be and perhaps should be. The sustainability of this development gives me real cause for concern. I don't think this is a sustainable development for this specific area, and while it may improve the townscape to an extent and may improve the area to an extent, I think the negatives far outweigh that. I don't think there's any room on this site for the proposed development that's here in front of us today. And while I believe that the site, much like previous sites that we've looked at as well, while I believe that the development of the site should be coming forward, I do not think that this is the correct proposal for it. I think there are some, as we're told on more than one occasion throughout these meetings, that it's an interpretation of the policies that are in place at the moment. And my interpretation of it is that some of the policies may be met, but there are more of the policies that aren't met, and more of the policies that are written down. For example, if we look at 14 there says, consider development proposal should be designed to improve the quality of an area regardless of size and support the 6 qualities of successful places. I think, yeah, it might improve the area, but the fact of the matter is that it doesn't support all of the 6 qualities of successful places. What is a successful place? It's where a family can live successfully for a long time. And given the tightness of this spot, I don't think that that's possible. The parking also kind of gives me cause for concern. Yes, there is a small area across the road from it that we don't know currently whose ownership or whether that's able to be used in any way, shape or form, but we have to consider that the parking spaces that are available that the agent has determined this morning are actually 6 parking spaces and 1 accessible parking space. Now, an accessible parking space, I'm not aware that these developments are adapted or adaptable homes, but if it's an accessible parking space, that's 6 parking spaces plus an accessible parking space. If that parking space isn't used, the accessible parking space, that's not available for anyone other than a blue badge holder to use. That would be my consideration where that's concerned. So we are talking about 6 parking spaces, which gives us a further shortfall. And it's not a perceived shortfall, as was stated earlier on. It is a shortfall. And as everybody has alluded to this morning, there's a significant amount of tightness right down the street in Alma Street that makes it very difficult to traverse at times. I think I would be minded to second Councillor Forrest on this occasion. I don't think this is the right proposal for this area. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. It's been noted, Councillor Sinclair, is seconding the amendment. Bailey Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Regarding the design, the policy 14, and Councillor Sinclair mentioned about the ones up at Gowan Avenue. My friend stays in the first house in Gowan Avenue. I can assure you there's no a big garden at the back because I've been in it. However, Policy 9 in the National Planning Framework clearly indicates that this is a former garage site. So exactly what this policy is looking for It states in the report, in principle, the residential use being proposed has been seen as acceptable as a residential use, as stated by the officer, and that is recognised as a brownfield site. Exactly what the Scottish Government are proposing before we go into any greenfield sites. Policy 13, sustainable transport. As the development is reasonably close to the town centre, I feel that this meets Policy 13. In the local development plan PE01 placemaking, the site is surrounded in 3 parts of the site, so I believe that it meets the policy PE1 criteria. As I've already stated, and as the Provost already stated, PE9, area of townscape and value, it states that the proposal doesn't look at the historical landscape with regards to other houses in the area. There are several houses being built recently. There's 2 next door. That is not in character with the rest of the street. However, it's accepted and they're built. And as already mentioned, at the top of Alma Street and the corner of Gowan Avenue, these aren't incoherent with the historical landscape of the area. PE27, brownfield, vacant, derelict land and empty buildings. This clearly meets this criteria, which officer already stated in the report that it does meet it. Policy 15 of the National Plan Framework 4, local living and 20-minute neighbourhoods. As placed in the urban area of Falkirk, I agree with the officer that this meets the criteria of policy 15. With regards to the parking and the guidelines, national guidelines of Craig's already mentioned, the national guidelines are there, they're guidelines. So are we really going to refuse this application because of 1, possibly 2 parking spaces? I feel that any conditions attached to the application can be met. And I think that bringing that back into life for the residents in the area and Falkirk will only help the housing needs in Falkirk. So I'm quite happy to second the Provost and his motion.
Thank you for that, Bailey Kerr. I'm going to go to Councillor Murtagh, but just to clarify where we are, we have a motion moved and seconded by the Provost Bissett and Bailey Kerr to agree the amended to grant application, and we also have an amendment by Councillor Forrest, seconded by Councillor Sinclair, to refuse. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. I mean, I agree with a lot of what was just said by Bailey Kerr and the Provost before him in terms of the situation with the policies. And I think that, you know, we all know we're in a housing emergency. We all know that we need to have every opportunity, particularly for windfall sites and infill development and develop on brownfield land. And it's very welcome when they come forward and they fit properly within the area that they're in and they're the right development. And I think that, you know, I won't relist the policies which Bailey Kerr just referenced, you know, and I agree with a lot of what he said, but I think we all know when we do our planning training, the very first thing we learn, and the principle that we're given, the guiding principle, is that planning is about the right development in the right place. And I think that this potentially is the right place for a development and would be welcome for many reasons that have already been stated by others, but it is the wrong type of development in this particular place. And I think for me, that is the issue. And it's not just about the parking. I think that the case officer was very clear about, you know, the type of housing that it's designed to be, you know, the 3 double bedroom type size, the family home element. And I think that, you know, in his opinion was perhaps that this plot would have maybe accommodated 2, maximum 3 properties, which I think would be a very, very different, I think probably, you know, not speaking for Councillor Sinclair or Forrest, but they seem to indicate a kind of similar, you know, feeling towards that. It's about the type of development that it is and the design of what's on site. And I think there was a few things earlier in the presentation and when it was given by the agent where I felt, you know, it feels a little bit like it's not developed enough as a proposal. There were a few things which were, you know, subject to one thing and another that could have augmented the scenario before committee. But one of them, as we know, we can't just say, well, do you know what, we would approve this if you would amend the design. Can you go and amend the design? That doesn't happen. It has to be a new design if that was the case. And I feel uncomfortable that the type of housing that's proposed here, the volume of it, is sufficient to, you know, to meet the criteria of this site. And I think if it was something else was to come back at a later date that better fitting, I would have a much different point of view. But at this stage, I think I'm more inclined to agree with Councillors Forrest and Sinclair that this is just not the right development in the right place. Thanks, Convener.
Oh, thank you for your input, Councillor Murtagh. Any other member at this stage want to come in? Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. And I've been listening to all the points made by the various councillors, and there is a lot of positive to developing this site, and I can see that. It's quite clear. It's obviously a bit of waste ground, and the problems that are in that in itself. It really torn with this one, genuinely torn with it. There's one plot of land particularly, I think if it was included in this application, but it's not, I think I would possibly look at this application probably in a lot better way. I think it's tight for 4 houses. I think if it was 3 houses, I think, I'm talking about this application because it's only this application today we can decide. If it was 3 houses, I would probably be fully supportive of it. If the application had been submitted covering that area that's in dispute, which could have been done, because as we all know, I could put an application in for this building here. Maybe not be able to do with it because I don't own the land, but you could still put in the application for it. And if this application had covered that area and as 4 houses, I think I would have probably been very positive about that as well. I think the taking out of that section makes it difficult then to put in the 4 houses, and I just wish it had either been 3 or it had been an application with a different borderline that had come in, and I would have probably looked at that in a different way. Yeah. I do have concerns. It's not me who's raised. It's obviously one of the people who have put in an objection has raised it. As James had mentioned about Japanese knotweed, I do have some experience of it, and I know the problems that it can cause people if they get it, and the time to treat it is ridiculous. But that's what you have to do. That's not actually affecting me here because that can be done. That can be done with the survey. The work can be done on that, but it does take time. The type of buildings I'm not worried about. I think I pointed out the flats as well when we were on site, at the back of it, the house to the side of it. I'm not concerned about that. So if it had been 3 houses, to be honest, I would have been very positive about this. I just don't think the way this application's written and the boundary line applied for allows for 4 houses. It allows for 3. Hopefully you're getting what I mean, is that, and I can see it has been 3, and I would have happily agreed this at 3. I don't think I can agree on 4.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points, really. One, we've spent a lot of time talking about the parking, but I know it's dependent upon the 2 lockups being purchased, but if they were purchased, looking at the site plan, there is an area of ground adjacent to these 2 lockups, and also the ground that's not currently owned, which is part of the lockup ground. If that was owned, you could easily, looking at the plan, I'm only sort of surmising, get 3 parking spaces or perhaps even squeeze in 4, because obviously the width of the lockups and that. So I don't see an issue if that ground was purchased regarding the parking. The only other comment I want to make is that regarding the size of garden, you know, we all know in an ideal world we'd like, you know, a big garden or whatever, but I've seen houses with, in fact, a lot of council houses have huge gardens, far too big for current day, if you think about it. And there are many houses with very small gardens. I think the garden size really, to my mind, is down to the purchasers of the houses. If anybody was to buy the house and thought, well, it's too small, then they could walk away from it. I just think it's an ideal opportunity for this infill site to get utilised rather than lie for the next few years as a horrible site anyway and get more complaints. But that's just my views, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you, and you're entitled to them, sir. I'll bring Mr. Whittle in at this stage.
Thank you, Convener. It was just a point of clarification on the comments you were making there, Councillor Flynn, in regard to parking and additional land. Just for the sake of clarity, to be clear, the application you're being asked to consider today is a detailed planning application, and your assessment is based on the red line of that application site. So it wouldn't be appropriate to then include additional land which is not part of this application.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members at this stage? Well, I would just like to say I've got this sheet of paper in front of me here, and I've been taking down all when I heard the provost at first, and then other members have been taking my notes in relation to the policy issues, which are really important. And then Bailey Kerr came in with policies, and I've been listening to everybody else. It's been a really fulsome debate. First of all, could I say that when we went on site, I think the first thing I said was, my goodness, this is a site that's desperately needing developed. It's desperately needing developed. Now, on the issue of the Japanese knotweed, and we had a good look round this site. I couldn't see any sign of that. Doesn't mean to say that it's not there, because over the years, having been on the planning for 30 years, we've been at a few sites where there's been problems with Japanese knotweed, and you can actually you physically see them. In terms of the location, I think this is a tremendous central location. One of the issues that has been brought up and by everybody is the parking issue. Now, I had asked the question at the very beginning in relation to who was all the cars belonging to that were there when we were down on the site visit, because the street was lined. I think Stephen had said that obviously it might be the tenants themselves, and it was their cars, it was outside their houses. But having been in the railway station before and trying to get somewhere to park, it's not the first time that I went down to Alma Street and parked the car because I couldn't get anywhere else to park it. So the fact of the matter is that we've had a really good debate in this. There is a difference of opinion from a number of members, and I would like to say wholeheartedly that I would support this application because I believe that it's central located, it fulfils the policy issues that have already been outlined, and I would be supporting the provost on this application. Thank you, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Convener. So I've noted that we have a motion by Provost Bissett, that's seconded by Bailey Kerr, to grant permission, and I'll run through what I took as being the reasons for that. Can I just clarify with the mover and seconder that covered that there was satisfaction with the parking provision and access infrastructure? Thank you. So I'll run over the motion, and we have an amendment by Councillor Forrest, seconded by Councillor Sinclair, to refuse the application in accordance with officer recommendations. So in terms of the motion, my notes read that having considered the officer's report, the development plan and material considerations, and having exercised its planning judgment, the committee agrees to grant planning permission as it considers that the following considerations are of significant and determinative weight. Firstly, the site is a regeneration of a previously developed site. The development will enhance the area, noting that the site is currently in a state of poor repair. Next, the development would not be inconsistent with other housing in the vicinity of the area and would assist housing needs in the area. The committee is satisfied as to parking provision and access infrastructure. Next, the committee is satisfied as to the design and layout of the proposed development, and exercising its planning judgment, the committee considers that the proposal meets provisions of policies, and if I miss any of these, please do say, HCO2 windfall housing, HCO6 infill development, IR2, IR3, IR7, IR13, IR18, Policy 14 and Policy 15. Does that, I'm seeing some nodding, which is reassuring. Then there would be a delegation to the Director of Police Services to grant permission subject conditions as determined by the Director, including conditions in relation to contaminated land assessment, a condition in relation to a survey for Japanese knotweed, and presumably flowing from that any required treatment. I think there was also mention, particularly by the applicant, of a condition in relation to window treatment and privacy and overlooking issues. I was less clear on the Scottish Power parking condition that the applicant did mention at one point. I'm not sure if my planning colleagues maybe were clearer on that point. I suspect we're maybe in a position where the committee's, if it was to agree, this is already noting in the motion it's satisfied as to parking provision. So that was my note of the motion. And as I've mentioned, that was by Provost Bissett, seconded by Bailey Kerr. And the amendment was by Councillor Forrest, seconded by Councillor Sinclair, which was to refuse in accordance with officer recommendations. So by way of a roll call vote, I will run through the members. Provost Bissett.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Amendment.
Bailey Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Forrest.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly.
Amendment.
Bailey Kerr.
Motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
Amendment.
Councillor Nimmo.
Motion.
Councillor Redmond.
Amendment.
Amendment. Can I just clarify, was that amendment, Councillor Redmond?
Amendment.
Thank you for clarifying that. And Councillor Sinclair.
Amendment.
So it's 6 votes for the motion, 6 votes for the amendment. So we have an equality of votes, in which case the convener is entitled to exercise a casting vote. Thank you.
I will do, and it will be originally stated for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. The motion is duly carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. That was a very fulsome debate. That takes us on now to item 5, discharge of planning obligation attached to planning permission, which required that the developer should retain the bistro manager's dwelling house and 3 holiday let cottages to be situated on the development and all time coming a single unit for operational and planning purposes, and should not subdivide the development or otherwise sell or dispose of the constituent parts or change or transfer of uses, therefore as permitted under the planning permission at Bridge 49 Cafe Bar, Whitecross and Lithgow for Mr and Mrs Brian and Jane Maloney. Now, before we bring in for the report, there has a deputation request been asked for by Brian and Jane Maloney. I'm quite happy to hear the deputation. Agreed. Everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed to that? Fine, thank you very much. That takes us on to the report itself, which is in pages 18 to 26 on your agenda papers, and the report will be by Julie Seidel-Gregory. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. This application requires to be determined by Planning Committee, as the original planning application was also a committee item. A Section 75 legal agreement binds all development to a single planning unit, as mentioned by the Convener, and restricts the subdivision, sale or disposal of the constituent parts or change or transfer of the uses. In the course of the application, representations were received as detailed in section number 4 of the report before you today. A further representation was received from an existing objector since the application was last heard by the committee, which maintains their objection. If members wish, I can provide an overview of that representation today. There is a planning application P240081/full, which accompanies this application, which proposes to change the use of the bistro to form 2 holiday lets. The planning application appeared on the weekly recommendation list of the 23rd of August. There was no call-in, and the decision notice now requires to be issued. Notwithstanding the assessment of that accompanying planning application, the change of use as proposed cannot occur without the discharge of the planning obligation as described. At the time of the original planning application in 2009, the development was presented as a package. The manager's house was justified as being required operationally to serve the tourism offer, and as such was necessary to make the proposal acceptable in planning terms at that time. This led to the planning obligation, which binds the development to a single planning unit and restricts the proposed change of use. The applicant claims that the bistro is now no longer viable and wishes to change the use of the bistro to form 2 holiday lets. The current development plan, which is National Planning Framework 4 and the Falkirk Local Development Plan 2, does not provide any policy support for new housing development in the rural area to serve this type of bistro or holiday let development. The current development plan directs that these are not uses which require a permanent on-site presence in the same way that animal husbandry does, for example. And on this basis, it's considered that the planning obligation is no longer necessary to make the proposed development acceptable in planning terms and does not serve a planning purpose relating to our current development plan. It's considered that enforcing the obligation would not be fair or reasonable. The bistro is long established and its change of use raises no planning policy conflicts at this time. The manager's house is established and occupied by the applicants. It is accepted that the original business plan is now changed and there is no merit in maintaining the terms of this planning obligation. It is recommended that the legal agreement now be discharged. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much for that. It's an opportunity now if Mr and Mrs Maloney would like to step up to the desk. Just switch your mics on and keep them quite close to you so everybody can hear. Okay?
That's okay.
That's perfect.
Okay, thank you.
You've got 10 minutes from now, and then there'll be an opportunity for members to ask any questions when you finish. Okay? 10 minutes starts now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Convener. What I've got today is I'm going to talk a wee bit about the viability. I'm going to talk a wee bit about us, and I'll talk a wee bit about our agent is on holiday this week, so he's made a written deputation, which I'm going to read out to you, but I'll come to that in a wee second. A wee bit about us. I mean, there's nothing particularly, in fact, there's nothing sinister at all in what we're trying to achieve here. We're hospitality people, always have been, always will be. We're running, at the moment, we're running Bridge 49 Cafe Bar, Prior to that, we ran a hotel in Kirkcaldy, Dunaker House Hotel, quite successfully for a number of years. Prior to that, we ran a hotel in Edinburgh Thrums Hotel for, seems like, for eternity. So we've been in hospitality all our life, and we're quite happy with hospitality. There's no attempt of some sort of development or anything like that. That's not us. That's not what we do. So far as the bistro is concerned, it simply is not viable. 11 years ago, it seemed like a fantastic idea. And at first, it was okay. It didn't really make money, but it didn't get us into financial difficulty. That kind of crumbled along. It kind of lost its way leading up to COVID. COVID was a disaster, to be perfectly honest. The other side of COVID, it just didn't come back. What massively didn't help our cause at that point, prior to that, there was no great competition. But along comes the bridge in at the bottom of the road. A company called Buzzworks bought it over, spent up £1 million doing it up. Place looks absolutely stunning. They have taken a lot of business away from us. Now, at the beginning of last year, there was a development in the country park whereby they built a little cafe. And again, we used to get a lot of business from country park users. That's now dwindled down to next to nothing because, understandably so, they stay within the country park and use the cafe. Not only that, hospitality is on a down. So effectively, we've got a situation whereby our turnover is decreasing all the time, our costs are rocketing all the time, and I think about a year or so back, I'd done some sums whereby basically Jane was working for about £1.75 an hour. It was making a tiny little profit. I think at the moment, if I was to do the sums, we're probably touching deficit, and that's what we need to stop. Anyway, what I want to do is run through the deputation from which our agent is putting forward. I'll read it out to you. There's 6 points here. 1. The committee is being asked to approve the planning officer's recommendation that the planning agreement relating to the occupancy of the manager's house associated with Bridge 49 Cafe be removed. 2. This is a legal planning procedure which by itself is the matter being asked of the committee to decide today. The planning officer has already deemed under delegated powers to approve a related full planning application for the change of use of the cafe to form 2 short-term holiday accommodations. In land use planning terms, the planning officer is satisfied that the proposed change of use is acceptable. Therefore, committee should not require to assess or debate the merits of the case when reaching its decision on the planning application in front of them to remove a legal agreement. 3. Since 2011, following policy advice issued by Scottish Government's Chief Planner, all planning authorities are being advised not to impose occupancy decisions such as the agreement in place between the council and the applicants relating to the property. 4. The planning agent has submitted a more detailed supporting statement to justify and demonstrate the reasonableness of removing the planning agreement which aligns with the above Scottish Government's advice along with Planning Circular 3/2012, planning obligations and good neighbour agreements. 5. Therefore, taking account of the most up-to-date planning policy position of the Scottish Government on this matter, the continued burden of the planning obligation is now both unnecessary and unreasonable. 6. The applicants themselves are here today to answer any questions that committee may have about the business and its operational constraints, change of circumstances, which is related to, but not a material consideration in the determination of the planning application. On the separate related planning application for change of use, the applicant's business case sets out clearly the significant challenges and constraints its business has continued to face in the cost of living crisis and the fact that the business is financially not viable or economic or sustainable to continue to operate as a cafe. I mean, one thing I would say in relation to that is Jane in particular has run the business for 11 years and has thoroughly enjoyed doing so, looking after the business, serving the customers, etc., and to be quite honest, enjoys her work, but it's not making a penny. That's my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that submission. There's now an opportunity for members to ask any questions in relation to this application before us. But just before I ask it, I'd just like to go back to Julie. Julie, could you maybe just simplify once again exactly what we're going to be discussing and what we're agreeing to or disagreeing to? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. So in 2009, an application was presented to the Planning Committee which dealt with the bistro, which is forms part of today's consideration, the Manager's House, both of which are constructed, and additional holiday cottages. Because that 2009 application went before the Planning Committee, this application to deal with the legal agreement has to come back before Planning Committee, and that's why that's presented to Planning Committee today. Accompanying that application was a planning application which deals with the change of use of the bistro to Form 2 holiday lets. There was no mechanism under our current scheme of delegation and the legislation that the Council has to put both of those applications together. So that planning application was assessed. A recommendation was made that that application should be approved for the change of use. It went on the weekly recommendation list and it was not called in. That application is sitting ready with a decision notice to be issued. That leaves then the application that deals with the legal agreement, the planning obligation, which is before you today. In terms of this application, the consideration for members today, to distill it down, is 1, whether there's been a change in circumstance, and 2, whether or not it's reasonable to enforce that legal agreement.
Thank you for that. Does members totally agree with that? Okay, then it's an opportunity for members to ask any questions of Mr. and Mrs. Maloney at this stage. Any questions online? Councillor Forrest.
Too many on, that's what it was. I'm very sorry to hear that it's not working out for you. It's been a favourite place of mine. My grandson always says, book the snow globes, because he loves sitting in the snow globes. So I'm really sorry to hear that this hasn't worked out. You're going to turn the bistro into 2 chalets, basically. You've already got planning permission for 3, I think it is. 3 others. Are you planning on developing them as well?
At this point in time, the answer to that is no. I mean, initially, we would have developed the lot had we had the finances to do so. But from memory, I think it all came in around about 2009, wasn't it? I can't remember that far back. But I also remember the banking crisis of 2008. And I remember at the time when we went to the bank to get the finance to develop Bridge 49, the answer was, get lost. There's no way you're getting a penny from us. So we thought, oh my goodness. So we had to scrimp and scrape and raise the money from other areas. I think we sold off 1 or 2 things that we owned, blah, blah, blah. And eventually we managed to put together the money to do the bistro. So that was the reason that we done the bistro and not the cottages. And to be honest, we move on. The ground's quite nice the way it is, to be honest, the openness at the top. So no, to answer the question, there's no plans to do that at this point in time.
Been there, done it. Most of my working life was actually in the hospitality trade, and I know how precarious it can be. Well done for trying. Thank you for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Councillor Forrest. I'm looking online. Any questions coming from online? None? You want back in, Councillor Forrest?
Just for a second, could I direct this to Julie?
You'll have an opportunity once this area is finished. Thank you. Okay, no other questions coming? Okay, it's an opportunity for you to retake your seat. Okay, thank you. Thank you. This is an opportunity to go back to your officer. Julie, you've heard the discussion and the submission from the applicant and questions that had arisen. Have you anything to add to your own submission?
No, I think the comments that were made in the presentation that was made by the applicants that reflects the information that's been before us when considering this application, and also to highlight the deputation from the applicant's agent there, where he referred to Circular 3 2012. I mean, I think that the original 2009 application was very much of its time when we did impose occupancy restrictions on rural housing. The circular just mentioned, it talks about restrictions, and it's something that's historically been used, particularly in respect to rural housing, as mentioned. That circular advises that imposing restrictions on use are now rarely appropriate and should be avoided. This type of restriction can be intrusive, resource intensive, difficult to monitor and enforce, and can introduce necessary burdens and constraints on persons that live in these properties. So that's the only thing that I would highlight. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Forrest.
Thanks, Julie. I think you have answered my question there. It's not a sort of condition that we would normally do nowadays. It was of its time.
It was very much of its time. Certainly, we can still use legal agreement restrictions on rural housing or indeed planning conditions. But certainly, the advice from the Chief Planner and noted in Circular 3 2012 and also case history would indicate that it's not something that we would generally welcome at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Sir. Bailey Kerr, get your light on, sir.
Yeah, it's a question for Julie. So the bistro has got permission for the 2 holiday lets.
A planning application was submitted to deal with the change of use and the conversion of the bistro to form the 2 holiday lets. That application was recommended as to be approved. It went on the weekly recommendation list. It wasn't called in. That application, we've not issued the decision notice yet, because obviously we were conscious that this application was coming up to planning committee. But we're ready to issue that decision. So the roundabout answer is yes, yes.
So my question is, if the applicant decided if it was decided that we weren't supporting it, we issued the holiday right for the build day 2 in the bistro. What we're saying is they could only sell the full lot if we didn't agree to the legal agreement. And they couldn't sell it in
the wording of the legal agreement, in effect, and we can maybe bring Ian Henderson in a moment, but the wording of the legal agreement in a legalistic way basically makes the manager's house, the bistro, and the additional holiday cottages, which are not yet constructed, as a package. So they can't be disposed of, but it also stops them from changing the use of any of those component parts. So if we issue the decision notice for the change of use, they've got planning permission for that, but that doesn't top trump or outweigh any other permissions they need to get, including any legal issues. This planning application deals with basically tidying up the legal agreement. If this is not approved today, then that would block them at this stage. They would be open to potentially appealing that decision, and then there might be other actions that they could take. I don't know whether it's wise to bring Ian in at this point.
Thank you. Through you, Convener. I don't think I would have anything particular to add to what Julie's just explained there. I think what was in my mind was, if it was refused today, there would be a right of appeal to the reporter, who would no doubt look in the round at the position and also consider the other permission for change of use that has been subject to delegated decision-making procedures. I don't know if that's of any help.
Yeah, great.
Bailey Kerr, thank you.
I think these conditions were put in place for a reason. I didn't agree with them. And I didn't think, and I'm glad that the reporters came back and says that we're no keen in using them, because I didn't think, personally, I didn't think it's right. We put a burden on somebody's property. Like Councillor Forrest, it has been a place where I've visited on a few occasions. However, 14 years is a long time and things change. People's life change. So I'm quite happy to put a motion forward that we accept the officer's recommendation.
I'm happy to, Councillor Forrest, you want to come in there?
I was just going to say I'll second that. Beat you to it for a change.
No, you're fine. Okay then, just to say that we have a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendation, which is to discharge the planning obligation. Is everybody happy with that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you.
We have a 10-minute comfort break, convener.
For break, sir. Hi. Julie's good. She's very professional. Richard. Excuse you, you're talking too much. I don't know who it was, but okay, then thank you for that. We'll reconvene this meeting today and we go straight to item 6 on your agenda this morning, which is the construction of dwelling house at Castle Hill, Whitecross and Lithgow for Mr James Whiteman. It's pages 27 to 38 on your agenda papers, and the report this morning is by Mr Brent Vivian. Brent, are you online?
Yes, I'm
Thank
online.
You, Brent.
Yes, thank you.
Carry on with your report, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask, is a Gemma that's showing the drawings and photos?
Yes.
Yeah, if she could just maybe just run through them, show them while I'm presenting, that would be helpful.
Okay, Gemma? That's fine. Thank you, Brent. Carry on.
This application seeks full planning permission for the construction of a 1.5-storey, 4-bedroom dwelling house. The site comprises land previously occupied by a redundant farmsteading, including a farmhouse, and it also includes the farm track, which provides access to the site from the B825 at the east end of the Lone Village. The steading buildings have long since been demolished. The Bauhaus burn lies to the south of the site. The application requires determination by a planning committee, as granting the application would be contrary to the development plan. There is extensive planning history for the site, which is outlined in section 3 of the report. The consultation responses are outlined in section 4. No objections are raised in those responses. The roads unit have requested conditions in relation to upgrade of the existing access. The flooding team is satisfied with the submitted flood risk assessment and drainage options report, and SEPA have no objection to the application on flood risk grounds. Turning to the development plan, the site lies out with the urban village limits within the countryside, as defined in LDP2. It also lies within a local landscape area and a non-inventory design landscape. In addition, the southern edge of the B825 at this location is covered by a tree preservation order. The main issue under the development plan is in relation to the rural homes policies, as it has not been demonstrated that the proposal meets any of the circumstances to support new housing in the countryside. While the applicant intends to breed horses and tend sheep at the site, it has not been demonstrated that the proposed house is necessary to support a viable rural business and that there is an essential need for a worker to live permanently on the site. There are not considered to be any issues in terms of the design landscape or the local landscape designation, and no trees along the B825 would be removed to facilitate the works to the access. The planning history of the site is an important material consideration in this case. Planning permission in principle was originally granted in 2005 for conversion of redundant agricultural buildings to form 3 houses. Planning permission in principle was later granted in 2015 for construction of a single house. This was sometime after the existing buildings were demolished due to their deteriorating condition. The 2015 application was granted by the Planning Committee. The committee considered that the proposed house, while not strictly in accordance with the development plan, was acceptable in the circumstances, as it would be within the footprint of the former demolished agricultural buildings, sympathetic to the former character of the site, in accordance with the development plan local landscape policy, and an enhancement to the visual amenity of the area. The agent for this current application has advised that the house approved in 2015 was never built, as the previous applicant was diagnosed with terminal cancer after commencing the works and passed away not long after the diagnosis. The family subsequently decided to offer and sell the land to the current applicant. The current application is essentially for a change of house type to the previously approved application, and it is considered that the previous reasons for the committee granting planning permission similarly apply in this case. In conclusion, the application is not considered to accord with the development plan for the reasons detailed in the report. However, the planning history for the site and the personal circumstances in relation to the previous planning permission are material planning considerations. In view of these considerations, it is considered reasonable to grant planning permission for the current application, subject to the conditions outlined in section 9.1 of the report. Thank you, Convener.
No, thank you very much, Brent, for that. Okay, I'm going to open it up. You've heard the fulsome report by Mr. Vivian, and the reason why it's come back here because it does not accord with the development plan. In terms of the conclusion, the application is not considered to accord with the development plan for the reason detailed above, and if you go through the report you'll see the past history. However, the planning history for the site and the personal circumstances that you can read about resulting in the previous planning permission not being implemented are material planning considerations. And in view of these considerations, it is considered reasonable to grant planning permission for the current application. And I'm quite happy at this stage to move to grant and agree the recommendation contained within the report.
I'll be quite happy to second that, Convener.
Councillor Bowes.
It's all right, Convener. You both spoke.
Okay, can I go online now? Just to clarify, the motion moved by myself, seconded by the Provost, to agree the recommendation contained, but we'll go to Councillor Bowes.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I will come in and I'll explain why I support this. I, in the past, have went quite strongly against building houses in the countryside, and it's something I'm not overly comfortable with. However, I have also been quite strong when there has been existing buildings actually there already. This, as Brent has very ably explained, is getting built on within the footprint of former buildings that were there. Therefore, I think this is very reasonable to allow this to go forward.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to come in at this stage? We have, just to clarify, a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendations contained within the report. Has everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of this meeting. Well, he's just a wee bit slow. It's no like him to be slow. Anyway, just like to take this opportunity to thank both members here and online and officers both here online for their perseverance this morning, and just to let you know that we've got a predetermination here this evening, and we're happy to see you either here or online. Other than that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Convener.